A former Buccaneers player makes his opinion known on what the Bucs need the most this offseason. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. We are talking about Super Bowl 59, as well as some interesting comments from Patrick Mahomes coming up in a little bit. But let's start with a former Buccaneers defenseman and what he thinks the status of the Bucs is heading into the offseason. So Gerald McCoy has been a big Bucs cheerleader on NFL Network throughout this past season, and he's been extremely vocal on social media about not just his support of the team, but also what he thinks they need to do this offseason. He's tweeted numerous times about going to get Myles Garrett, but he knows that there's more positions of need than just edge rusher. However, he seems to believe that edge is the single most important need for the Bucs right now. When he was on Tampa sports talk station WDAE, McCoy spoke about the Bucs' needs and said, quote, "You can either go corner or edge rusher as the greatest offseason need, but our four leading guys in sacks were three inside interior rushers and Levante. And you got to have somebody who can go win one-on-one on the edge. If the Bucs had what they needed, they wouldn't have went and got Shaq at the end of the year going into the playoffs. This is not a shot at the guys we have. It's just reality." End quote. This is going to be an ongoing debate among Bucs fans throughout the offseason and heading into free agency. And, that is where the Bucs need to put their effort in improving the defensive side of the ball. I've talked about edge rusher and corner quite a bit, but insider Scotty and I were texting on Thursday. He was saying that he believes the biggest need is inside linebacker, and I totally get where he's coming from. Scotty texted me, quote, "In my opinion, our most pressing need is linebacker. We have a 30-plus age that may or may not come back," referencing Levante David, of course. "We have Servassier Dennis, who hasn't played 30 snaps because he can't stay on the field because of injuries. Russell, Britt, that's it." Scotty asked me what position I would take at 19, and I'll tell you what I told him. I said edge and corner, to me, are more pressing needs, and that whoever they take at 19 would be a reflection of what they were able to do in free agency. So right now, it's really hard to say what position I would personally focus on. If they trade for an edge or sign an edge rusher and bring in a corner, then it makes sense to go linebacker in the first round. But then again, they could probably get a starting linebacker in free agency cheaper than they'd get a corner or an edge rusher. Scotty responded, voicing his opinion, saying, "You did see how bad we sucked in linebacker pass coverage, right? We were top tier in team sacks. If we don't have stud linebackers, our run defense and passing defense will suffer. Our passing defense was bottom of the league the last 2 years. Go look at how much of that was on linebackers. I'll remind you, Britt and White. It's atrocious. Diaby and player X can hang. Cornerback Hall should be ready, but yes, draft cornerbacks. My draft would look like this: linebacker, cornerback, edge, defensive line, linebacker, wide receiver." Scotty, I 100% get where you're coming from. I know linebacker is a need. Here's the big thing. Edge corner, linebacker, to me, are the top three needs. I'm not going to argue the point that you're making that the Bucs need an upgrade at linebacker. However, heading into 2025, here are your edge rushers on the team: Yaya Diaby, Chris Braswell, Marquise Watts, Jose Ramirez. That's what you got. At corner, you have Zion McCollum. Right now, you have Jamel Dean, but again, I don't think that he is going to be on the roster in 2025. Then you have Tyke Smith, Christian Izien, Dallas Flowers, Tyreek Funderburk, Josh Hayes. At linebacker, we aren't sure about Lavonte David yet, but if he returns to play, he's returning to the Bucs. I think he's back, but not counting him, you have Servassier Dennis, Deion Jones, Antonio Greer. KJ Britt, JJ Russell, they're free agents. Bryce Hall, Tavier Thomas, the cornerback additions from last year's free agent class, they are free agents. Anthony Nelson, Shaq Barrett, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, they are all free agent. Yes, the coverage at linebacker was bad last year, but I'm going to be 100% honest. I would rather re-sign KJ Britt for cheap and start him or rotate him with Servassier Dennis than start Josh Hayes or Tyreek Funderburk as my number 2 outside corner. I would rather have Britt or Russell as my starting linebacker than hope that all of a sudden Jose Ramirez or Marquise Watts turn into prime Shaq Barrett. No matter who is out there, the pass coverage is going to be bad if you aren't getting to the quarterback with your natural pass rush. Cansey and Vea, they're great. Hall, he has flashes and then he disappears for games at a time. But when you have to constantly send additional resources in order to generate pressure, you leave your corners on an island, or you end up giving the opposing quarterback 5 or 6 seconds in the pocket waiting for someone to get open in zone coverage, you're going to continue to get gashed. That's what we're seeing in this pass coverage. You have to find that guy opposite of Yaya Diaby that is going to win his battles consistently. That's why people are so high on trading for Myles Garrett. He is the best in the NFL over the last 5 years in incompletions and interceptions generated by pressure, even though he's double teamed on 30% of his snaps. That's the difference maker that you have to improve your pass defense. Think back to exactly 4 years ago today as I am recording this. The Bucs bludgeoned the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They were able to mask Devin White's deficiencies in pass coverage. They were able to bracket coverage all night long to prevent Tyreek Hill from going nuts. How? Because Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul won their battles all night long. Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh won their battles all night long. The Bucs didn't have to blitz in that game. They got to Mahomes with their natural pass rush, and that's not something that they've had for going on a couple of years now. You can survive games and win in the postseason with average linebacker play when it comes to coverage. Yes, Lavonte David is getting older, but he's still playing at a very high level. The Bucs, no joke, can win a Super Bowl with KJ Britt and Servassier Dennis rotating next to Lavonte as long as they have the ability to generate pressure without having to send Antoine on blitzes constantly, without having to send Tyke Smith on blitzes constantly. Do that on occasion, absolutely. Do that as a surprise element. But when you're having to take some of your best players out of their position, out of the secondary, because your guys on the edge cannot win one-on-ones and can't get to the quarterback, it weakens the entire back end of the defense. It's a full catch-22. You don't get pressure, your secondary is hung out to dry for too long. You bring blitzes with guys in the secondary that are good at doing that, but you then weaken your secondary by having to send your best guys after the quarterback. So then the coverage as a result isn't as good. You have to have that edge rusher to allow everything else to fall into place. I think the Bucs either draft or sign an inside linebacker, and I believe they bring back Lavonte. I love the idea of Lavonte and Dre Greenlaw. It's not a long-term solution, but the two of them together are going to cost you about $14 million in 2025. That's essentially Jamel Dean. You can cut Jamel Dean, and you get Lavonte and Dre for 2025. So this is a really long-winded way of saying that the Bucs don't need guys on the outside to just hang. They need guys that are going to be able to make everyone behind them better by getting after the quarterback and generating big sack numbers. I agree with you, Scotty, 100%. The Bucs have to upgrade at inside linebacker, but when I am looking at what is going to benefit the defense the most, from top to bottom, from front to back, edge rusher has to be the number one concern for this defense. Then you can have an honest debate as to whether or not you stick with Jamel Dean and you focus on upgrading linebacker, or you need to focus on the cornerback position to get out from under that bad contract from a guy that can't stay on the field and then be able to start opposite of Zion McCollum. Some tidbits out of New Orleans during Super Bowl week regarding Patrick Mahomes in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of your life that you want to rewrite or a plot twist that you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life that you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Whether it's learning how to set boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland in the morning. You can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Given that this is the 4-year anniversary of the Buccaneers becoming the first team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl in their home stadium with an absolute dismantling of the Kansas City Chiefs, I felt it was right to talk about this story now. Granted, we've had a busy week of Myles Garrett speculation, trade talks, offensive coordinator announcements, and press conferences. But during the week leading up to the Super Bowl on Sunday, the sports world has been abuzz about the Chiefs and the Eagles because, of course, they're the ones playing in the final football game that we're going to get until August. But during the week, Patrick Mahomes was asked a very simple question, and it was if there was a loss that keeps him up at night. Mahomes simply responded, the Super Bowl versus Tampa, pretty easy. Let's take a moment to look back at that game. Patrick Mahomes was 26 of 49 for 270 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. Tom Brady, on the other hand, was 21 of 29 for 201 yards and 3 touchdowns. Playoff Lenny had 89 yards and a touchdown. Gronk had a pair of touchdowns on 6 receptions, and Antonio Brown had a touchdown as one of his 5 receptions. Tyreek Hill, who scorched the Bucs for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter earlier in the season, 7 catches for 73 yards. The Bucs defense was suffocating, hitting Mahomes 10 times in the game. They had 9 passes defensed as a team, 5 tackles for loss, including 2 from Devin White. The Chiefs hit Brady just twice, sacked him only once, had only 3 tackles for a loss, and no takeaways. It's funny to look back and see the Chiefs called for 11 penalties in that game, given the overwhelming consensus that they get all the calls to go their way. 2 of those 11 penalties were huge pass interference calls drawn by Mike Evans, but the Bucs were called for just 4 penalties in that Super Bowl. Since Patrick Mahomes became the starter for the Chiefs going back to 2018, the Chiefs have scored fewer than 20 points just twice in a playoff game. Think about that. They're 17-3 in the postseason, in the Patrick Mahomes era, and they have scored fewer than 20 points twice. Once was Super Bowl 55. The other was a 17-10 win over the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship last year. There have been no games in the Mahomes era where the Chiefs haven't scored at least one touchdown, and no games where Mahomes himself hasn't scored at least one touchdown. There was a win over the Colts in his very first playoff game in 2018 where he didn't have a passing touchdown, but he did have a rushing touchdown. But in Super Bowl 55, he and the Chiefs were held to 3 field goals. That was it. So when I say what the Bucs did in that game was special, when I talk about how Bucs fans should probably root for the Chiefs a little bit on Sunday, not just because of their hatred of the Philadelphia Eagles going way back to the late 90s and early 2000s, but it's for that reason. Because of what Tampa accomplished defensively. Forget about Tom Brady. Forget about Gronk, playoff Lenny, AB. Think about what the defense did against the Chiefs in that game. It was truly historic. In offense, with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, they did nothing against that Todd Bowles defense. 0, zip, zilch, nada. That's why that game, that loss, still keeps Patrick Mahomes up at night. He had never seen anything like that in his career up to that point. He hasn't seen anything like it since. He probably never will. That was back when the Chiefs' offense was the thing that carried that team. Now it's the defense of Kansas City that's doing all of the heavy lifting. So when I talk about how much of a need it is for the Bucs to get a alpha edge rusher, whether it's Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson, or it's drafting Mike Green or Nick Scourton at number 19 in the draft, when I talk about their need more than anything else being an edge rusher, it's because of situations like that. It's because we've seen the magic of Todd Bowles' defense when he has those guys that can win their battles and get to the quarterback. Todd Bowles, for all his faults, is one hell of a defensive coach. And the Bucs were real close to winning another Super Bowl the following season. It was the offense, essentially, that pretty much let them down throughout the year, but it was a bad play by Antoine Winfield Jr. against the Rams after an epic comeback that cost them their opportunity to win another Super Bowl. Yeah, you had Chris Godwin go down with an ACL tear. You had Antonio Brown strip off his clothes and run off the field. You had all kinds of problems. But when you have guys that were winning at the rate of Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh and JPP and Shaq Barrett, you were able to accomplish a lot more. You were able to mask more deficiencies in the linebacking core, in the secondary, because of that pass rush. That's why I am so steadfast in the Bucs making sure they get that alpha. I talked a lot about edge rusher leading up to the NFL draft last year. How many times on this show did I talk about Chop Robinson and Jared Verse? Jared Verse just won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, I thought the selection of Graham Barton was great. I think he's going to be an all-pro center for the Bucs for the next 5 years. But edge rusher was important last year. Edge rusher is even more important this year. And all you have to do is see how effective Todd Bowles' defense was when they had those guys on the edge. The only thing that I wish was different about Super Bowl 55 was that Mike and Chris, I wish they had been more involved. Evans drew those huge pass interference calls that led to a Bucs touchdown on one drive, but the two greatest receivers in team history combined for just 40 yards on 3 catches in that game. I wish it had been more on that stage, and I hope that they're going to be back sooner than later with the Buccaneers. I have to stipulate that. I don't, as happy as I would be for Chris Godwin to get there with another team, I would rather see him out there with Mike and the Buccaneers. But going back and watching that game, going back through the play-by-play, going through the stats, you see how vital that pass rush is to the success of this Buccaneers team. Super Bowl 59 predictions. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to use and navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. The Kansas City Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites over the Philadelphia Eagles with an over-under of 48.5. The favorite to win MVP is Patrick Mahomes at plus 120, followed by Saquon Barkley at plus 250, and then Jalen Hurts at plus 370. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you're going to score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards, rushing touchdowns, receptions, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. Again, over 10 million members and billions in winnings. It's clear that people are loving this platform. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and we're talking about Super Bowl 59. I let Evan break out his crystal ball. I'm going to treat this the way I did all season long with these Bucs games. I'm going to give you my predictions for the big game. Let's start things off with the bold prediction, and my bold for this one is that these two teams are going to combine for one touchdown in the first half. Kansas City is allowing 21 points per game in the postseason, while the Eagles are allowing just 18.3. But both of these defenses have been beyond impressive throughout the season, and they've been able to clamp down in the biggest moments. I don't see either of these defensive lines bending much in the first half. I'm a little nervous about the Chiefs' rushing defense after the way they played against the Bills and now having to face Saquon Barkley, but I think the defenses control the first two quarters in this game, and we end up only seeing one touchdown between the two teams. It's going to lead to a lot of people talking about how boring the game is, how it's, it's a letdown, yada, yada, yada. It'll get way more exciting in the second half. I think the first half belongs to the defensive side of the ball. My predicted player of the game, look, if the Chiefs are going to win this one, it's going to be because they shut down Saquon Barkley. That's going to fall on the shoulders of Chris Jones and Nick Bolton. Jones has been arguably the best defensive lineman in the NFL over the last couple of seasons, and he's going to get a lot of the focus of the Philly blocking schemes to try to free Saquon Barkley and let him run wild through the Kansas City defense the way he did to everybody else all season long. So Nick Bolton has to have an MVP caliber game in tracking and stopping Saquon Barkley. He's been fantastic all year, but this is going to be, and by he, I mean Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton has been fantastic all season long. But this is going to be the toughest test that he faces for sure, because let's be 100% honest about this. Saquon Barkley was the real MVP of the league this year. I get that it went to Josh Allen. I understand why it went to Josh Allen, but it's unfortunately become a quarterback award. It only goes to quarterbacks. It should have gone to Jonathan Taylor a few years ago, should have gone to Christian McCaffrey last year. It should have gone to Saquon Barkley this year. Why we continue to only give it to quarterbacks is beyond me, but that's neither here nor there. That's a soapbox for another episode. But if Philly wins, it's because Saquon does what Saquon had done all season long. If the Chiefs win, it's because Nick Bolton steps up and has a monster night in shutting down Saquon Barkley. For my score prediction, obviously, I am going to take the Chiefs in this one. I think this is going to be a tough, tight game. I already said just one touchdown between the two teams in the first half. I think this is going to come down to the final possession. It's going to be an edge-of-your-seat finish for this one. And look, no one wants these two teams in this game. Everyone wants both teams to lose. Nobody likes Philly outside of Philly, and no one wants to hear about how Patrick Mahomes is now the greatest quarterback of all time because he's the first quarterback to win 3 straight Super Bowls, even though the defense carried him the last 2 seasons, and he lost a Super Bowl to the actual greatest quarterback of all time. With all that said, someone has to win. And until a team not named the Bucs can be the ones to beat Kansas City in a Super Bowl, I'm going to assume it's just not possible. So give me the Chiefs to win this one 23-21. Drop your score and your bold predictions in the comment section here on YouTube. And again, this is like a nightmare matchup for about 98% of NFL fans. Just take great solace in knowing that while one of these teams has to win the game, it also means that one of these teams has to lose the game. So at least there's a little silver lining. One of these two teams is going to lose, and that'll make you happy regardless of who ends up winning. But that's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. We got a mock draft Monday coming up on Monday. I think we're going to do a situational mock draft in this one. We are going to do a hypothetical trade for Myles Garrett. All right. And then we are going to draft for need based off of what picks the Bucs would have left. I think that would be a fun way to kind of shape this draft out. That's the plan for Mock Draft Monday. If you have another suggestion, another stipulation, anything like that, feel free. Insiders, shoot me a text. If you're not an insider, become one. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes, or just shoot me a DM on Twitter at LockedOnBucs. You can give me your stipulation or a different style of mock draft that you would like to see. Of course, follow on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and make sure that you are following on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.